Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's event, Meeting the Needs of Consumers of Color with Fintech. My name is Amelia Josephson, and I lead the Financial Solutions Lab Exchange here at the Financial Health Network. Next slide, please. For our agenda today, I'll kick us off with a few words of welcome before turning things over to Change Machine and the National Association for Latino Community Asset Builders for their presentation. Following the presentation, we'll have some time for Q&A, and we encourage you all to share questions using the Zoom Q&A feature. After Q&A, my colleague Megan Skaggs will close us out and highlight some other upcoming events. Before we dive in, we always like to share an antitrust statement on our webinars. Here at the Financial Health Network, we assign the highest priority to full compliance with the letter and spirit of antitrust laws, and we require attendees to ensure that their participation and communications at the meeting do not violate antitrust laws or policies. And with that out of the way, we can go to the next slide, please. For those of you who may not be familiar with the Financial Solutions Lab Exchange, we're a membership and grant program that enables nonprofits and fintech providers to collaborate and swap insights on building high-impact partnerships to further financial health. As I said, my name is Amelia Josephson. I'm a manager on our innovation team here. My colleague Megan Skaggs, who's just come on video, and I make up the Financial Solutions Lab Exchange team, and you'll be hearing from Megan later in the webinar. Next slide, please. I'm now delighted to welcome our speakers, Megan Bellato, Assistant Director of FinTech Partnerships at Change Machine, and Brenda Jimenez, Program Manager at the National Association for Latino Community Asset Builders. Megan and Brenda, I see you're on camera, welcome. Megan joined Change Machine as the Assistant Director of FinTech Partnerships in December of 2019. In this role, she leads the team's fintech work, exploring opportunities to connect practitioners with the products and services that support their customers' financial security. Megan holds a Bachelor of Arts in International Relations from the University of Georgia and a Master of Public and Nonprofit Management and Policy from New York University. Megan and I had the pleasure of working together when Change Machine was part of the Exchange's 2020 grantee cohort, which is how I first learned about some of the great work you'll be hearing about on today's webinar. Brenda Jimenez serves as the Program Manager for the Financial Capability Program area at the National Association for Latino Community Asset Builders, or NALCAB. In her role at NALCAB, Brenda supports organizations through grant making, technical assistance, and training intended to build the capacity of financial capability programs. Brenda holds bachelor's degrees in communication and Hispanic studies from the University of Texas at Austin and a master's degree in public administration from the University of Texas at El Paso. Brenda is also certified as a master trainer in credit as an asset from Credit Builders Alliance, which I'm sure many of you in the audience are familiar with. Megan and Brenda, we're so glad to have you on today's webinar. I will turn things over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We're really excited to be here, and we have a lot to share. So let's get into it. First, let's talk about who's in the room. I know we've got a lot of folks from different places, so we're going to launch a poll, and please let us know kind of which audience you're coming from. All right, so we're looking at researchers, practitioners, financial coaches, frontline workers, anyone who's working kind of directly with community members, policymakers, funders, or program managers. Right, fantastic. So it looks like the vast majority of us here joining us are practitioners, which is great. We're really hoping that a lot of the learnings that Brenda and I are going to share are going to directly relate to the work that you do, and we're excited to hear what you have to say and questions you have. We do have a good amount of researchers here as well, and a few program managers, more program managers than anyone else actually. So some policymakers and some funders, so fantastic. Great group of folks. We're excited to dive into this discussion with you. All right, so Change Machine, a little bit about Change Machine. Change Machine builds financial security through people-powered technology. We champion the aspirations of those who are most economically disadvantaged by oppressive public policies and practices, namely Black and brown women who navigate financial insecurity. Their success means success for all. and Brenda.
Thanks, Megan. Here at the National Association for Latino Community Asset Builders, we're a national network of almost 160 mission-driven organizations that empower Latinos and immigrants across the US in over 40 states, including Washington, DC and Puerto Rico. In NELCAP, we also help build the capacity of nonprofits and government agencies through grant making, technical assistance, training and impact investing as a certified CDFI. And NELCAP also helps influence the domestic economic agenda by advocating for local, state, and federal policies that support community development. And with that, we will go on to our next slide. We want to pose this question to our audience members today, and you can answer in the chat. We'd like to hear from you. What do you see as some of the greatest opportunities when it comes to building the financial security of communities that face systematic barriers due to race, gender, or nationality through fintech? So let us know. We want to hear from you.
Yes, we have a large group here, but we know that you all have plenty of expertise, thoughts, questions, so we definitely want to hear from you. All right, we've got building generational wealth. A recording of this webinar will be available.
Changing family trees, yeah.
I love that. Courtney, access to safe and affordable credit, credit management, decision-making assistance. I love that.
Yes, using technology, increased access.
The ability to democratize. They're going so fast. You all have so much to say. This is great. Democratize access to capital to the most deserving communities. I love this, democratizing access. That's great. Housing and financial stability.
Helping families earn more.
Great. Ability to customize or pick the product that's the right fit for their financial lives. I love that. And education. Great. All right, good. I'm glad we're so, keep them coming. I'm glad y'all are so engaged. We're excited about this. Customizable products, fantastic. All right, so let's jump into it a little bit and share some of the learnings. So as part of the Financial Solutions Lab 2020-21 exchange grant, as Amelia mentioned, we, Change Machine, wanted to address the financial health challenges of workers and students. So we vetted and tested a suite of 5 products geared towards the financial security of historically Black colleges and university community members, building on existing partnerships that we already had with HBCUs in primarily North Carolina, as well as South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, and Washington, DC. The 5 Black founded products were chosen because they aim to address the specific financial health needs of students and administrators, including debt management, sufficient liquid and long-term savings, spending less than income, paying bills on time, planning ahead. Additionally, each of these products were vetted through Change Machine's Seal of Inclusivity, which is a criteria through which we evaluate fintech products and services. So let's look at the 5 products that we vetted. So the first is Mochify. Many of you might be familiar with this. Mochify, it's a digital bank with no minimum balance, overdrafts, no in-network ATM fees. They do have accounts and debit cards that are issued by and backed by Sunrise Bank, and they're all FDIC insured. Mochify also allows customers to enroll in rent reporting, which is really fantastic. And I will say that that was one of the most popular features that we heard about when we heard feedback from the focus groups we held. We also had Kitty Credit. It's a credit education app geared towards families with young children. Kitty Credit provides a responsible path to individuals' first credit card. Their mission is to empower credit healthy families, and they have a lot of really great movement actually happening with Kitty Credit. AlgoPair is an automated trading app that uses algorithms to help customers invest at a risk level that's appropriate for them. And so customers can choose what risk level they'd like to work with. The mission is to break cycles of financial exclusion, and help people build wealth. Home Lending Pal is another one. It's an automated mortgage advising service that supports customers through the process of home buying all the way from start to finish. Super easy app to download. Their mission is to empower first-time homebuyers with the information they need to understand the cost of buying their first home. And then finally, Spend Debt, which is a debt reduction tool that allows users to set predefined micro roll-up amounts to their everyday transactions. There's a small fee every month for using Spend Debt, but it helps folks to pay down their debt over time. So these were the 5 products that we vetted and then shared with the focus groups. All right, so to gather perspectives, we recruited members, as I said, of the HBC community and invited them to participate in a paid 2-part consumer focus group. Participants were first introduced to the products in a kickoff session or in a one-on-one session with myself, and then they were given the chance to ask, kind of early questions or share early impressions or feedback. And then we asked them to kind of spend a couple of weeks exploring the products on their own, looking up websites, downloading the apps if they wanted, or otherwise just kind of spend some time digging into these apps and noting any additional questions, thoughts, concerns they had. Then we brought everybody back for another focus group where we had a series of kind of set questions, but really open-ended conversation to hear what people thought. The focus groups were recorded, transcribed, and the qualitative data was actually categorized and analyzed to help us kind of see what people thought about all of this. All right, so that's the engagement that I'm sharing with you. A quick question for the audience again, just to keep us all engaged. What role can nonprofit practitioners play in holding fintechs accountable, not only to protect, but promote the financial security of those who have been historically pushed to the margins of economic systems? Lots of action here in the chat. What are you all thinking? Please include your answers. Let us know what you think. Particularly, I'd love to hear from some of these practitioners that we have on the call today. Train their teams to have empathy. Interesting.
Consumer protections.
Yeah, very good. Community reinvestment requirements that extend to fintech. I love this idea. That's pretty cool.
This is a great one. Make sure products are equitable and not so much bureaucratic red tape.
Oh, no kidding. Pressing to gather data from nonprofit organizations about serving historically marginalized populations. Absolutely, that data sharing is so important.
Create community reinvestment requirements that extend to fintechs. Great point.
Love this, yeah. Utilize grant funding to offset risk to allow outside the box offerings and lendings. Yeah, there's a lot of really interesting stuff happening there. Transparency around algorithms and protections against bias and discrimination. Absolutely, we've been doing a lot of work around that at Change Machine, explicitly kind of thinking about data as an asset and kind of where the trade-offs are. And then seeking to understand the barriers that prevent financial service firms from meeting their needs. Fantastic. All right, wonderful.
Great.
All right, go ahead, Brenda.
Thanks, Megan. So in 2021, NowCap and Change Machine undertook a pilot project to help organizations integrate financial products into their financial capability services. And this project was sponsored by Capital One. NowCap has long seen the potential for fintech products to meet the financial needs of Latino and immigrant communities that our members serve. And Change Machine was in the process of creating their seal of inclusivity. So this partnership really helped combine NowCap's wide network and Change Machine's expertise. Next slide. So in this engagement, the participating organizations that we had were branches located in Miami, Florida, Chinese Community Center in Houston, Texas, El Centro de la Raza in Seattle, Washington, and Building Skills Partnership in Los Angeles, California. Each one of these organizations was provided with a modest grant and technical assistance for a 9-month engagement. And as I previously mentioned, the purpose of this grant engagement was to assist these organizations in implementing a fintech product of their choosing that would meet the needs of their clients. So NowCap and Change Machine provided these organizations with training and technical assistance for the 9 months. And the technical assistance that we provided to these organizations was, helping the organizations evaluate and select the products that they were appropriate, trustworthy, and fair for their clients, to ensure that the fintech product aligned with the needs of their clients. And we also assisted with the initial integration of the fintech product, either in their services or in their program, but also helping the organizations figure out a way to track the implementation of this fintech product and identify, what were the barriers to the adoption or the usage of the fintech product that they chose for their clients. So now let's look at the implementation approaches. In terms of implementation, one of our organizations in this engagement opted to do focus groups with their clients. And during these focus groups, they would inform the clients on how the fintech product worked, the capabilities of it, and how to use it. And then at the end of the focus group, the clients were given a survey, which helped the organization capture that information in terms of, what was their general feedback on the content that they just heard about, and then also their general sentiment towards the fintech product. The other organization decided to implement their fintech product with their children and youth FinCap program, specifically because this group was already familiar with the financial technology. And then also the organization recognized that this particular group or particular age group is more likely to integrate technology into their financial lives and education moving forward. Our third organization implemented their fintech product during their one-on-one with their clients. So the way they would do it is, as they were working with their clients and helping them articulate their financial goals, and they were creating out their plan on how to reach those goals, at that point, they would introduce a fintech product that could assist them with that financial goal, whether it was savings or maybe modern, credit monitoring. At that point, the introduction of the fintech product happened. And our last organization was in a different situation than the previous organizations because they had already created an application. They had an organizational application that they used, an organizational app that they would download. And so what they wanted to do was integrate the fintech into their organizational application. The organizational application they had helps clients stay in touch with their financial counselors. It helps them learn about upcoming organizational events. And then it also provides access to educational information. But the organization wanted to conduct a survey to better understand how many of their clients currently use their application, how many knew of their application, what access of internet did their clients currently have, and by what means? Were they using smartphones, smartphones, desktop, laptop, and then also, gauge what was their general sentiment with fintech products in terms of were they already using fintechs, how likely were they to adopt these fintechs, and if they were interested in fintech but they had not adopted, which ones would they be interested in? And in essence, these survey results help the organization pinpoint the fintech products that their clients were interested in, which were bill pay, savings, and budgeting. So that information became essential as it helped the organization form their strategic planning and their outreach campaigns moving forward. So, in terms of the fintech products that these organizations implemented during this engagement, we looked at mobiles, which you heard Megan talk about earlier, and then the Focus Card, a reloadable prepaid card that functions as a no-cost or savings account. And this was especially beneficial for those individuals that might be underbanked or unbanked. Biteable, which was an online platform created to create short animated step-by-step educational videos. And then Yususu Lending Circle app. So this allowed the participants to create a lending circle with family or friends using their laptop or their phone. We also saw credit history monitoring applications, which I'm sure a lot of you on here are very familiar with, like Credit Karma. Online banking applications became essential, especially as you saw with COVID, a lot of the bank hours were reduced. So being familiar with online banking applications and virtual tax preparation systems. So helping clients be able to file taxes virtually. We could go on to the next slide.
Excellent. Thank you, Brenda. Yes, it was a fantastic engagement. And I think it's also worth noting that we have just launched our second round of the Capital One grant just yesterday, actually, with 3 of the organizations. So we'll be building on all of the work that they did last year and kind of continuing on in a couple of very interesting ways. So stay tuned. We'll share more of that later in the year. So those were our engagements that we wanted to share, and some of the now we'll jump into some of the learnings and things that we pulled out of it. And right now, what we're going to talk about first is kind of just from an intermediary perspective, from where Brenda and I sit, or from a policy perspective or a fintech perspective, some of the things that we've learned about kind of engaging with customers and practitioners. So right at the beginning. But before we jump in, we've got another question for you all. And a lot of great stuff in the chat. We are going to be talking about all of this in a little bit as soon as Brenda and I get through everything. But thank you for continuing to share your thoughts and questions. So I wonder if this is actually the same question we asked earlier, now that I'm looking at it. Nope, this is a little bit different. Okay, yeah. So before we were talking about practitioners, this one is more about the role of the nonprofit sector in working to ensure that fintech products are available to support the financial security of Black and Brown women. So what is the role from a sector perspective? What is the role of the nonprofit sector? And what do you see as the role as the fintech sector? Like where are these two needing to do more work?
So let us know. You can put your answers in the chat. You all have been providing a lot of great feedback, by the way, in the previous questions.
Super exciting. Fintech providing information and support to nonprofits. That's interesting. I'd love to dig into that a little bit more.
Nonprofits share consumer insights into fintechs, definitely.
Absolutely. The neo-CDFIs, interesting. Adding Black and Brown women to the fintech talent pool, absolutely. That is something that we at Change Machine are really focusing on. So we are particularly interested in partnering with fintechs that are led or founded by Black or Brown individuals or women. So I would 75% of our partners currently are Black or Brown or women led, which is really exciting.
Outreach with populations through non-mainstream communication channels, definitely.
Absolutely. Nonprofits can identify pain points, absolutely. Interesting idea, the ability for nonprofits to leverage its community practice. I'm assuming that's what you mean by COP, to fund fintechs. Interesting, particularly for those fintechs that maybe are historically excluded from funding rounds and seed funding. That's great. And this from Corby, nonprofits can serve as mediators, facilitators, and champions for fintech tool benefits and outcomes. Absolutely, we're going to dive into that just in a minute. Fantastic. Brenda, anything else you want to pull out before we jump into the learnings?
No, I think there's a lot of great answers on here. It's hard to keep up.
Yeah, this is fantastic. This is great. Okay, well, we'll dig all into that when we get to the more Q&A portion. So here we are, introducing fintech into social service programming. So when partnering with social service agencies or nonprofits who are aiming to support financial security goals of the communities they serve to integrate fintech, we've learned a few important lessons. So first is to take a flexible approach. Just like there's no fintech that's perfect for everybody, every agency and community in which they live and are located are unique and have unique needs, and will need to plan for embracing fintech as a financial security resource differently. So exactly as Brenda described, our most recent Capital One event with all of the different organizations, each organization had to really kind of take a step back and think, how can we do this in a way that makes sense for us, for our staff, for our team, but also for our customers, our clients, the communities that we serve. So with lots and lots of different ideas and different approaches, but that's definitely something that we've learned. And then secondly, just like the communities they work with, practitioners may still kind of feel like fintech is a kind of a brave new world, potentially fraught with lots of unknowns and even potential for harm. So it's important for practitioners to have access to information about financial products and services that are powered through technology in a way that is digestible and straightforward. As many of you are practitioners here on this call or program managers. There's not a lot of time, not a lot of time to research. So what we really need to do, all of us, is think about ways that we can gather this information and get it out to folks who need it so that they can get tools and resources into the hands of folks that could really benefit from them. In the same way that a financial coach might assist a client or customer through the process of comparing traditional brick and mortar checking account options, for example, financial coaches now and in the future are going to need to be prepared to assist clients and customers with the process of comparing tech-based financial products or services. So again, practitioners are going to need those tools and resources to do this effectively, which is why Change Machine actually developed our recommendation engine, which offers training and technical assistance for practitioners to make product recommendations in the context of a financial coaching session and support customers with product usage and weed out potentially predatory or not the right fit kind of products and services. And lastly, as with introducing anything new or different, it's important to take early stock of not just where the clients or customers are, but also the organization and the staff. So even with something as simple as interviews or surveys, some of the things that Brenda described, our grantees did in the NowCap cohort and the Capital One cohort, kind of different ways to reveal and uncover how comfortable folks are with technology. And you might actually be surprised with what you hear. Additionally, since fintech products range from very basic, such as just a simple checking account or debit card account, to much more complex, such as insurance or retirement or debt management, it's a really good idea to identify some of the main areas of financial interest that of the community. So perhaps it is small business entrepreneurship, perhaps it is a real focus on housing or credit building. It's important to kind of identify some of those main areas of financial interest to narrow the scope of the existing fintech market. And so, yeah, exactly. Just to bring out another example from the Capital One cohort, one of those groups actually identified budgeting as a specific priority, and then others saw high need for tax preparation products. All right, and now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the learnings specifically around customers, consumers, and fintech. All right, so some of the learnings that we found, and this comes out of definitely the fintech, the Financial Solutions Lab Exchange Grant and the HBCU roundtables that we did, or sorry, not roundtables, focus groups that we did, as well as what we learned, Brenda and I learned just from working directly with those organizations. In terms of thinking about fintech, some of the things, inclusivity, cost, accessibility, relevance, and language access are all very important. So finding a product that is in the language that the person speaks is obviously going to be something that's more helpful. Products really should be designed with end users in mind. We know that fintech companies are in business, to make money, as well as to hopefully solve for existing kind of problems in the space, but that end user is the most important piece. Products should also promote consumers' confidence in managing their own finances and meeting their goals. So it's really important for fintech makers to remember that the consumer, the customer, the client, they are the expert in their own lives, and products should help them to feel more confident that they have the tools that they need to be able to reach their financial goals. Products should also, the most valuable products, the products that consumers and customers that we've spoken to see the most value in products that support generational wealth building and other long-term goals. And then finally, this is no surprise, and I know this has come up a couple of times in the chat, consumers find value in products that were created by developers who share lived experience. So absolutely wanting to continue to support more diversification in the fintech space, lifting up Black, Brown, and women founders who can create products and services where there is a need, and consumers can feel more comfortable about using those particular products.
Yes, definitely. And I think, we also learned a lot around when it came to the implementations in terms of fintech with the financial coaching. So some of the things that our practitioners learned as they were trying to implement these products with their clients was, that regardless of how familiar the client might be with fintech applications, it was still very necessary to pair it with, educational coaching was key, because that would ensure that they were able to use the fintech application on their own independently. And so that became, very important with that piece. They also learned that, a lot of the participants, especially if they were having to navigate, some applications that weren't as user-friendly, visual guides became important to help them navigate those complicated online platforms when they weren't with the financial coach. But it was also beneficial not only for those clients who prefer to have that step-by-step instruction. So that also became important with them. And the other thing was that, clients that had a low level of exposure or knowledge around fintechs tended to have more skepticism around the adoption of fintech products. The interesting piece that came about, though, during our Capital One engagement was that skepticism tended to minimize when the fintech product was being now, recommended through a friend or a family member. That skepticism tended to diminish, and they were more likely to then adopt the fintech product or tool if it was coming from, a trusted relationship that they had. And so then I think now we're going to go ahead and open up for Q&A. So let us know if you have questions, put them in the chat, and we'll try and get to them as they come in.
Yeah, thank you both so much. And folks, our attendees, please go ahead and use the Q&A feature, pop your questions there. They'll be ported over to me. And we've had a couple questions about access to these rich slides and the information in them. The slides will be sent out along with the recording after the event. So you will be able to dive in more on your own time. I'll kick us off with a question that came to mind for me. I loved hearing about the different consumers that were reached as part of these engagements. And then I think one of the audience members commented in the chat that nonprofits can help fintechs identify and address gaps that impact communities of color. So I'm curious to hear from both of you and your experience, what you think those gaps are and what the fintech sector can do to address them.
At least in what we saw in this Capital One engagement, a lot of it was language barriers. We tended to have a lot of language barriers. Like I said, a lot of our members tend to service Latino and immigrant populations. And so sometimes we had these great products, but they were limited because they were only offered in English. And so that would limit the usage of those fintech products with the members.
Absolutely. I think even taking it a step further than that, there are many fintech, products that we've come across where the application itself might be translated, but the terms and conditions are still in English, or the customer service is only in English. And so I think that, fintechs who really want to meet the needs of consumers kind of across the board really need to kind of think about how they can take things a step further and increase trust, right? Because if the terms and conditions and the privacy policies are not in your language, then, that's not good enough. I think also, like, related to that, many of the barriers that, you can think about. So like finding checking accounts that a person under the age of 18 can open without having a parent or guardian. Yeah. That's a huge challenge. Finding financial products and services that can serve immigrants who are maybe have I-10 or no social security number, but also who may want to be sending money back home, out of the country. Lots of kind of different gaps and barriers in that space. Also, I think we would all be on the same page to feel like products that require, kind of high credit scores, or products that require, kind of the ability to borrow money and a certain amount of money. These are all kind of barriers to entry. And so fintechs would really do well to kind of look at some of these barriers and think about how they can address them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of those barriers would apply to, traditional financial services as well. Some of them might not be unique to the fintech sector, but certainly worth calling out. And I think also the point about the terms and conditions needing to be translated gets back to what some folks were saying in the chat around just consumer protection and transparency concerns that people might have or feel that the fintech sector needs to do more to address. We had a question come in about just the research design and the difference between asking a user, which of these fintech tools would you be interested in using versus having folks actually download and start using them and then asking them about their experience based on that use. Maybe Megan, you have thoughts there?
Yeah, so I think actually I saw that question come in, and I think it may, I might be wrong, but I think that may actually relate to El Centro de la Raza's focus groups. But what we did for the HBCU focus groups for the exchange is we gave folks a choice, right? So we shared the fintechs with them. We walked through them, each of the 5 fintech products, and gave them a chance to ask early questions. And then we said, kind of go off into the wild and explore these in the way that you want to. And in some cases, people downloaded them and used them. In some cases, people downloaded them and said, not right now, but next year I'm going to be ready to buy a home. In some cases, people just looked at websites and things like that. I think absolutely, like in a more rigorous kind of event, we would, ask folks to actually download and engage with the product. However, that is a challenging thing with fintech or any financial product, really, because if you're not really sure if you're going to use it, there may be hesitancy in going ahead and signing up and connecting your bank accounts and all of the things like that. So that's something that we're thinking a lot about from the fintech perspective, actually, is how can fintechs do a better job of sharing the experience of using their product or service without somebody going ahead and having to commit to it. I hope I answered that question correctly.
Yeah, anything you wanted to add, Brenda? Or?
Yeah, so during our engagement, our organizations did the same. So, again, they would make the recommendation for the fintech product based on the need of the client. So in the case of the focus groups, a lot of the people attending those focus groups had identified the need to want to use an app around creating a budget. And so that's why that particular fintech product, Mobills, was presented to the group.
Yeah, I think, with the coaching relationship, there's always, or from what I understand, a desire to not push and be driven by the goals of the client and to present multiple options. And so from a research perspective, I can see why that would lead to the kinds of outcomes you're describing, where the exploration of the tool is a little bit more self-directed. And I think the points that you've both raised also have important takeaways as far as tracking impact, that it's not just, oh, did the person download this tool, but it's like, are they still using it 6 months later, or is it still relevant to them? We had a question about how prevalent access to technology is as an issue, whether in either of the or any of the engagements described, folks were struggling with lack of consistent mobile data, for example, or how you would respond to that.
Yes, definitely. So that was also one of the barriers that we came across during our engagement was, and I think, I think all of us in this call can attest to the digital divide that came about when COVID hit. And so that was very much prevalent as we were trying to assist these organizations in implementing these fintechs. Sometimes that was a limiting factor because of, some clients, even though they have a smartphone, it doesn't necessarily mean that they know how to use all the capabilities in that smartphone. Or some fintech applications, for example, might look great on a desktop, but are not really apt for the smartphone. And the clients only use, their only access to internet was a smartphone. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also important to just bring up that in many cases, if your only internet access is on your smartphone, it's important, and this is just kind of a PSA for practitioners, and you're working directly with consumers in your community for whom that may be true, to talk through the security differences between using an application on your phone versus using it on a desktop. It can be a little bit less secure on a phone. So, I think we've also seen like lack of access to technology, but I think more lack of access to technology and internet. It's exactly what Brenda described. It's maybe unfamiliarity with like the complex tools, concerns about like, how do I get my information in here, concerns around data privacy and things like that. I think what we've found at Change Machine and in partnership with NowCab is that the actual access to technology, barring rural communities, of course, is not as much the problem as the comfort with technology.
Yeah, I think you've touched on several interesting, you and the folks that are chiming in from our attendees have touched on a few different interesting questions, one of which is access, another is kind of comfort or facility, and then a third being trust around digital tools. We had a question come in kind of asking what you had seen in these engagements about the relative trust that clients might have in a digital tool versus an in-person advice or conversation. I think part of what I took from the presentation is that combination was really powerful. But curious to hear more about what you saw around trust.
I think trust is a really complicated thing here when we're talking about fintech, because there's difference between trust or lack of trust in technology and then trust or lack of trust in financial services in general. And I think that the latter really stems from the fact that in many cases, traditional kind of the formal traditional financial services, brick and mortar, if you will, really have not been designed with communities of color in mind, with women in mind, with folks who are facing barriers. They're not designed there. So it's not even as much of a lack of trust as much as it is, this doesn't even work for me. It doesn't make sense for me to use this. It's not built for me. It's not for me. So there's like an exclusionary thing happening there. And so that's actually where I think fintech has a lot of opportunity, because it is more of an open space and there's opportunity for innovation. There's opportunity for really kind of designing for an end user in mind and meeting people where they are. So I think that's actually a really exciting opportunity. In terms of trust in technology, yeah, that's a challenge, I think though, I think one of the things that Brenda and I absolutely learned is that, and that's kind of one of the points that the suggestions we have made about, asking the questions, doing surveys, focus groups. I think that we have found, and the members of the Capital One cohort from last year found, is a little bit of a surprise, kind of an assumption that no one was going to have smartphones. And then once they did a survey, they're like, oh, actually they do have smartphones, or an assumption that nobody knew what mobile banking was. And then when they actually asked their clients, it turns out most of them had already downloaded their mobile banking app. They weren't necessarily using it, but they were already there. So I think that, yeah, there's discomfort with technology and new things, but I would kind of challenge practitioners to test their assumptions on how much people are actually already kind of engaging in technology, particularly after the past 2 years.
Yeah, definitely. And just to add to what Megan said, I think, as I mentioned previously, so there was definitely some skepticism. And one of the, interesting pieces as we did this Capital One engagement was one of the organization actually noticed, with the age group, right? If they tended to be 50 or older, they're used to the brick and mortar, so they weren't so receptive to the fintech. But then again, we go back to their lack of exposure to fintechs and they're, also the knowledge around fintechs, because then again, that skepticism tended to fall off if the recommendation would come from a friend or a family member. Those same people that were reluctant to adopt the fintech, but then were more likely to adopt it. So that's, that was one of the interesting lessons that we learned during that engagement.
Absolutely. We've had some questions come in about the sort of sample sizes or the sizes of the groups that you were working with as part of these projects. Some requests for full data downloads, which I don't know if your organizations are planning on publishing, but certainly we can make those links available if they've been published already. But I think just it would be helpful for some folks to get a sense of the number of consumers that were reached as part of these engagements.
So the short answer for the exchange lab work that we did with the 5 fintechs, and then we spoke to about 100 community members from the HBCU community, those that actually participated in both sets of the focus groups. So the first and then came back for the second one, ended up being around 35, but we did talk to probably around 100 kind of in general, getting early initial feedback and things like that. And then Brenda, I'm sure you have the actual numbers for the different communities in the Capital One engagement.
Yeah, so, we, in this Capital One engagement, we had, 4 organizations that we work with. And I can, so each organization easily serviced more than 50 clients during this night, engagement. So, I would say on average, the sample size would be about, 50, but again, each organization was different. So, but I would say as an average, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. A question came in on the chat that I think is very interesting and relates to some of the work that our Financial Solutions Lab Accelerator is doing around the best way to incorporate public benefits resources within the fintech space. So as part of the cohort that Change Machine was in, a fintech called Leap Fund was also part of that cohort that helps people understand and navigate public benefits cliffs. But we know there are other groups out there doing this work as well. I think we've also seen that it can be challenging to incorporate some of those like state or city specific benefits into one comprehensive tool. So curious to hear if either of you have thoughts on the benefit space as it relates to fintech.
Yeah, there's, interestingly enough, Change Machine just released a report on our website, and that is available, a white paper on how fintech might address public benefit obstacles. So I can put that in the chat if that's appropriate for me to share. So that is one resource that my colleagues put together, and they did a fantastic job. Just kind of shout out for them. I think they did a great job on that. We've also been partnering with a couple of interesting fintechs that are trying to address this. The most common one that I think everybody probably knows is Propel's provider app, which connects folks with SNAP and EBT benefits and helps them to kind of manage those benefits and save money. We've recently partnered with a fintech called Catch, which is really a portable benefits tool intended, I think, initially for contract workers or gig workers, but it's usable for anybody and helps folks to kind of navigate taxes, insurance, retirement, and savings all at once. And so we're definitely looking at a lot of different ones. I think that there's absolutely a demand for that. You're totally right, Amelia. State by state is always different. Even I know providers has struggled with that a little bit. And so there's a lot of movement in that space, and we're keeping a close eye on it. There's no like aha solution yet, but it's certainly, I think, something that's on everybody's mind.
And does that align with what you're seeing?
Yes, definitely. Like Megan said, I think it, just that's kind of where the problem lies with some of those fintech apps because of the different regulations that we come across by state. So,
yeah. We had some questions come in about how the information shared on this webinar will be used. And I do want to hear from both of you about what's next for your respective organizations. But before that, I think folks might benefit from kind of a call to action if you have one.
Yeah, well, I think the call to action from Change Machine's perspective is absolutely reach out to me, join us. If you're a fintech, let's talk. If you're interested as a practitioner or a program manager in kind of engaging more with us in terms of getting access to tools and resources that can support practitioners or financial coaches, learning more about fintech, we're doing a lot of work on that side. And then also our whole policy arm at Change Machine is really diving into this year. And so we are really excited about thinking about the ways, just as you said, Amelia, a lot of the barriers or challenges that folks face with fintech they're also facing it in the traditional kind of brick and mortar financial space. So as we think about kind of what we can support and what we can kind of lift up, what are promising practices and what are some practices that we need to be regulated or regulated in a different way. We're also working really closely on that. And then Brenda and I are always cooking up interesting engagements together. So we're always happy for you to join, whatever kind of fun stuff we have coming down.
Definitely. And I think, for us, I think, this Capital One engagement really showed us how invaluable the data that nonprofit and practitioners can provide around fintech adoption and usage, especially, again, to reach the marginalized, populations that they serve. And so, that's kind of our call to action, is bringing more light to that and being able to get past those barriers that we see with some of these fintech apps that, the language barrier, the internet, and just try and create a better. I think one of the things that we encountered was also opening up the communication lines between fintechs and nonprofits. So definitely, advocating more for that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's music to my ears, because that's kind of the reason the Financial Solutions Lab Exchange exists. So great to hear that, those connections are providing value for both sectors. Brenda, anything you want to add about what's on the horizon for NALCAB in 2022?
As Megan said earlier, we're excited. Thanks to Capital One, we've just kicked off our new grant, which is a continuation of this pilot program that we just discussed here. And so we're excited to work with those organizations, specifically looking at how to possibly scale some of those implementation approaches, and just looking forward to the new learnings that will come about from that engagement.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both, and thank you to everyone who submitted questions in the chat and in the Q&A. I will invite our team on the back end to share the slide deck again, and I'll turn things over to my colleague, Megan Skaggs.
Hello, everyone. I just wanted to reiterate what Amelia said about just thanking everyone for attending. Thank you for your conversations within the chat, your questions and your comments. And of course, a special thank you to our speakers, Megan and Brenda. If you've enjoyed this session, be sure to join us in future events in which we'll continue diving into ways to support the financial health of consumers. Our Exchange Workplace session is actually just around the corner on March 30th. You can join us here to learn more about what top employers are doing to promote financial health in the workplace. And you can check out more on this via the link in the chat. Next up for our big events is the Emerge Financial Health. This year, the event will be taking place in September, from September 21st to the 23rd in LA. Though we will also have the opportunity to live stream through a virtual option. In this event, you will be given the chance to converse with cross-industry leaders and to collaborate and learn about the future of financial health alongside one another. And you can also learn more and save the date via the link in the chat. Lastly, thank you again for joining us all today. I really enjoyed reading all of your comments and learning from the speakers. And I hope we can continue to have these types of conversations as we move forward. If you're not already signed up for our Exchange newsletter and you want to continue to have these types of conversations, or you want to receive emails from the Financial Solutions Lab, you can do so using the link that will be shared in the chat to make sure you hear about all of our upcoming events and grant opportunities. And then be sure when the event closes, the survey will pop up on your browser, and we do appreciate your filling that out to let us know what topics you'd like to see us explore in the future webinars focused on promoting financial health for all. Thank you all again. We're so excited to have you here today and look forward to seeing you in future events.